My friend, member of Congress, Kat Kamak, that she's expressed so articulately what I've seen, what I've experienced so many times, been in the night on the border, going down those dirt roads along the Rio Grande. It is incredible. And some would think, oh, well, isn't it compassionate to encourage people to come to the United States? It's the most unneighborly, uncompassionate thing that we could do. These are people who, other than the gang members, those who are part of the cartels, those coming from groups in the Mideast and other places that don't have U.S. interests at heart. But so many of them, they're looking for a better way of life. Why do they not have a better way of life where they are, including especially Mexico? Well, it's because of the unsecure border we have that allows the Mexican drug cartels to make tens of billions of dollars every year coming from America for the drugs, for the fentanyl that kills, for the sex trafficking, for the human trafficking. We're funding the corruption in Mexico. I mean, my wife and I had our honeymoon. We didn't have much money at all. $300 got us a 5 nights, 6 days in a fabulous place in Mexico. But we don't go back because the drug cartels no longer say hands off of the tourism. Mexico is being devastated by the drug cartels. And it's America and administrations like this that are allowing them, actually making it possible, not just allowing, making it possible. Some might say they're truly accessories to the corruption, to the criminality that is going on. And in fact, evidence of that comes from the fact that as Border Patrol had told me before this administration, when they used to talk to me and never, ever tried to prevent me from getting to the border and seeing exactly what's going on. That's all changed now. This administration did not allow me 2 nights in a row trying to get to the border, as I've done countless times before. Wouldn't let me get there. In fact, used the place where normally you get down from the embankment, go through the wall that's been constructed by the Trump administration, go down through the flat area, and then you come up to the levee road, and then that allows you to get miles and miles down the dirt roads along the Rio Grande where thousands of people are coming across. And they didn't allow it this time. They used the wall not to keep out illegal aliens, but to keep me from seeing the outrageous travesties and tragedies that are going along our border, because people are being lured to their detriment. In tort law, it'd be called an attractive nuisance, like having a swimming pool and having no fence so that a child is drawn in and then drowns. Well, this administration is luring people to their detriment. So many, and I've been there many nights, it's not on the list of questions that's required to be asked, but so often the Border Patrol asks, how much did you pay, basically the drug cartels, to bring you into the United States? And it was usually between $5,000 and $8,000. And then often they would say, you don't have that kind of money. Where'd you get that money? And they'd indicate here and there, getting this much there, friends in the U.S. sent this much. So what about the rest of the money? The drug cartels, they're going to let them work it off when they get where they're going. How do they get where they're going? Well, at that point, it's either Health and Human Services or ICE or Border Patrol. Their job is along the border. They don't, once they transport to a facility, that's usually the end of their transporting. But ICE, Health and Human Services, and now we have the military that's also providing transportation. But as the Border Patrol said, the cartels call us here in the U.S., federal government, their logistics. They get them across the border, and then they don't use UPS or FedEx or even the U.S. Post Office. They use the federal government and taxpayer money to ship these indentured servants of the drug cartels all over the country, to cities all over the country, wherever the drug cartels want them to be selling drugs, sex trafficking, human trafficking. The U.S. government actually makes that happen. They facilitate that. We've had so many Border Patrol, again, before this last visit to the border, when this administration wants to hide what they're doing at the border. They say, oh, well, if you give us enough notice, then we will put somebody, and this is effectively what they want, to put somebody I'm supposed to supervise over me to watch what I'm doing, prevent me from doing proper oversight down where I'm supposed to, where they're supposed to be doing their job. Prevent that from happening so that America does not see how absolutely tragic this invasion is. Yes, they're gang members, but so many are people coming in, and the cartels know, taxpayers in the U.S. who are funding the drug cartels are also going to pay for the education, all the needs of those coming in. This administration doesn't care. What they're looking at is future Democratic voters. But they've got to act quick, because the longer people are here, the more they realize, you know what? If I'm for hard work and I am for making my own way, and I don't want to see babies killed in the womb, I believe in working a full day. I do believe in marriage and a strong family, devotion to family, and believe in God. They start thinking, wait a minute, that sounds more like a Republican than a Democrat, because they don't believe in abortion, most of the folks, and they do have a faith in God, devotion to families. And if you read, or if you read what BLM said they believed in, destruction of what they call the Western-style marriage is one of their biggest tenets. Why? Because they're Marxists. And to get to Marxism, you have to create chaos. And as Paul Harvey used to talk about, one of the best ways, and a critically important way, to create enough chaos so that you can move toward Marxism is to destroy the family, the nuclear family. And of course, BLM has it wrong. It's not Western-style marriage. It's not something that North America or South America or Central America came up with, what's typically called the West. It didn't come from this side of the planet or this hemisphere, except in the Middle East. And a man named Moses had a revelation from God and let people know, here's what God says. A man shall leave his father and mother, a woman leave her home, and the two will become one. That would be marriage. Not Western style, I guess Middle Eastern style. Didn't originate here, and it's been found throughout history to be the best building block of a very strong society. And that's why surveys continue to find that although, of course, there are people that excel coming from broken homes and other avenues, the best chance a child has of succeeding in life is coming from a two-parent home and a strong nuclear family. I've seen firsthand what Marxism does. I've heard the director of what we would now call daycare in the old Soviet Union bragging that these children don't belong to their parents. They're just temporary caretakers. We monitor what parents tell their children. If they ever say anything negative about the government, we immediately take the child away and give them to a more deserving caretakers. I thought at the time, thank God I didn't grow up in the Soviet Union. Thank God I grew up in East Texas, and I had a mother and father, and they cared deeply about me. And I was so grateful for blessings that I had had. And wow, the Soviet Union. It failed because it was destined to fail. Marxism is always going to fail. And people think, oh, but it sounds so wonderful, share and share alike. No, you have a very small ruling class, and then you have everybody else. And I've been in those stores. And toilet paper, so often, no, it was not available. But I learned and I saw if things, really luxuries like real toilet paper, store would get those in and they would put those in the back. And if you were a government official, then when you came in, they would get you some toilet paper. If it's a shoe store, they got good shoes in, they kept those in the back for government officials. Why? Because they were sucking up to the government officials. In Russian, it was called blat, a political pull. And you wanted to have some, so you kept the best of whatever you got in to sell. You kept that for people that had power, so you would do favors for them so that you might have a little power. And as one Soviet told me, college student, in your country, you can get ahead no matter who you are. You can get ahead by hard work, making more money, and then money will help you make your way up in society. Here, there's only really two ways to move up in society. One is to suck up to people who have political power, and I guess maybe it's a subheading of that, but that's also ratting out other people. And as he told me, you can get ahead by working harder, making more money. Here, the best way to move up is to step on other people. If you see them do something inappropriate, then you rat them out, and that will allow you to move up. Because, except for the very top people that have everything they want, other people, they mostly get the same amount of income. That was also tried in Venezuela. It failed. It will always fail. And anybody that was so stupid that they could not foresee what was emerging, and that is a very strong, powerful middle class in the United States, part of Europe, Marx couldn't see that coming. He was too blind. And he couldn't foresee the formation of labor unions that could stand up to greedy Democrats, billionaires, such as we have here, the billionaires that, by the way, paid hundreds of millions of dollars to affect the election. and who was able to vote and how ballots were gathered. Yeah, well, over in the Soviet Union, you don't have to worry about that. As Stalin pointed out, I don't care who votes. He just cared about who counted the votes. And we'll be seeing evidence continue to emerge from Arizona and Georgia, and I think eventually Pennsylvania. But to hear anybody say that there was absolutely no evidence of fraud, it's like John Funn said when he wrote the book about fraud in elections some years back. The biggest fraud about elections is the statement there's no fraud in elections. There's always been. Lyndon Johnson certainly knew about that, as did people that tried to research allegations of voting impropriety, and the courthouse burned down, destroying evidence. These things have gone on. Cook County, Chicago, you think there's not been fraud in Chicago? You'd have to be either crazy or dishonest to say there's never been fraud in an election in Chicago. It goes on. The trick is to try to minimize the fraud so you don't disenfranchise so many people. But there's evidence of fraud. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of affidavits, sworn testimony about fraud in the last election. And I know there's plenty in the media to say it didn't happen, and because that they're saying that out of either ignorance or dishonesty, others feel comfortable, including people right here on the floor, that say it's totally debunked, there was no fraud in the last election, and that's a statement out of ignorance or out of being deceptive. But we have got to clean up the elections. We have got to quit being a joke in the eyes of foreigners who have paper ballots, or even as bad as things have gotten in Iraq. There for a while, they had free and fair elections, and in 2005, having been over there right after their first election, talking to one of the chiefs of police there, he was telling about how, of course, the voters, when they voted to avoid fraud, you dipped your finger into purple ink that would last for a couple of weeks, so you couldn't vote a second time. And if you didn't dip your finger in there and have proof of who you were, you didn't vote the first time. So he was telling me that a policeman who was monitoring the election saw someone suspicious, and on checking saw that he had a bomb, a suicide vest. He threw the man down, jumped on top of him. Both of them were killed. And I said, wow, I guess that sent all the voters scurrying, fleeing. And he looked surprised and said, no. They knew if they got out of line, that policeman would have died for nothing. The policeman died trying to secure a fair opportunity to vote. And yet nowadays that's being belittled. We shouldn't even utilize voter IDs, shouldn't have to have an ID. Well, that's the best way to ensure that there's not fraud in the election. Just like it's the best way to ensure that someone's not illegally getting a gun or getting a cigarette or getting alcohol. People produce those all the time. Let's quit disenfranchising so many people that are voting lawfully by creating the ability to have people vote illegally. And we keep hearing about, oh, gee, that's not true. We need to censor people and not allow them to speak or submit things online if they're not in conformance with what the liberal Democrat high-tech industry or the liberal Democrat media say is true or not true. We listened to 4 years of lies about the Russian dossier when it was produced by a former MI6 agent in England who even admitted, yeah, my sources, they could have been working for Putin. It was a manipulation and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. And the FBI was in cahoots and, in fact, even lied to the FISA court. It really got my attention, having been a judge, to see that FISA court judges had so little regard for their own status, their own courts, that they would not take action to hold in contempt people who held the court in contempt by lying, by defrauding the court in order to spy on a political presidential campaign. My goodness, there's never been a presidential campaign treated as the Trump campaign was. Even had a Democrat official on tape admitting we're the ones that paid for violence to get started at Trump campaign events so that we could claim that Trump was stirring up violence. That was in 2016. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we needed a Justice Department that would be just, and we don't have it right now. For heaven's sakes, heard from a constituent 2 days ago who that day was shocked to have 2 FBI agents show up at her place of work in East Texas. She had not come to Washington on January 6th. She was at work in East Texas. And the only reason those FBI agents could have showed up at her place of work was because her nephew texted her a picture of someone who was here on January 6th in Washington and asked, see anybody you recognize? Because it looked like his aunt. And she said, wow, I thought that was me. And then jokingly said, don't turn me in. Well, unless the FBI were monitoring those text messages, which was either by the grant of a warrant from a FISA court that, in my opinion, was breaking the Patriot Act, was breaking the law to grant such a warrant, or they were committing a crime and spying on people's text messages without authority. I mean, this is getting out of control here. And of course, we don't hear any stories about the people that were looting and creating insurrections in cities around America last summer. We don't hear about them being arrested, having their homes wrongfully broken into by police or federal officials. No. But we're hearing about it, and it needs the illegality, the brown shirt tactics of the federal government. They need to stop. Mr. Hoyer says he was shocked 8 months was all somebody got for disrupting an official proceeding. Well, that also happened on June 22nd, 2016, for 26 hours on this floor, and I'm surprised that Mr. Hoyer wants to see his fellow Democrats going to prison for more than 8 months for obstructing an official proceeding. I yield back.